To answer your question, I think if you put something out that is of value, both with what the needle picks up and with what people are looking at, then you're ahead of the curve of a lot of things. And, there are bands that put out really great looking records, but I think their music is shit. And there are bands that have shitty looking record covers, but have great music.
Hey, Jeff, how's it going, man?
Going pretty well. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for coming to the Question and the Answers podcast. So Jeff Berman is also known as Divided Heaven, and has been around the scene for quite a long time and released several records. Actually, just recently, yesterday, dropped a brand new single called "They Poisoned Our Fathers," which is coming out via Smartpunk Records. And I wanted to bring you on the show and just kind of talk about the new single, kind of dig into what's been going on in your world over the last several months. And man, I mean, ultimately, just kind of get a vibe for what Divided Heaven's all about. So, tell me a little bit about.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Tell me a little bit about this new single that you've got. And, it looks like you have a collaboration with Lydia Loveless on this, right?
Yeah, very fortunate to have Lydia sing on this song. I'm a big fan of her music. We played a show to about 6 people in Chapel Hill, North Carolina a couple of years ago, and she was there. And it was, I had loved her records for a number of years, but I had never seen her live, and I never knew what she looked like, which isn't really a significant factor, except for when, her partner's buying a record from us at the merch table and she's standing next to him and I have no idea who it is until somebody fills me in, and I proceed to go up to her and totally fanboy out and try to play it cool. So that nice kind of happenstance turned into, enough of a friendly correspondence that I felt confident and enough to ask her, and she was kind enough to do it. They Poisoned Our Fathers is a song that I wrote about this recurring conversation that I've been having while touring during the Trump years. And I'm sure that you've experienced this as well, Andy, where everybody has a Trumper in their family, if not multiple. And, as we're waiting to load into shows or we're at the shows and we're just commiserating, we say, I can't believe my father voted for Trump, or I can't believe this, or I can't believe my cousin or my brother is a Trump supporter. Like, what the fuck? I thought I knew this friend of mine and it turns out he's a Trump supporter, and, I think like-minded, tolerant people were really taken aback that people that they knew and loved were in fact Trump supporters. And it really kind of hit home with me, with my wife. She had a big blow up with her dad on the telephone. And it was hard, and she was kind of pleading with him, you don't understand, your vote, you're making the choice as an adult. I can respect that, but your vote for such a vile person and just a fucking con man like Trump is really stings, I'm your fucking daughter. And she cited other examples about, our nieces and nephews who are not, entirely white. They're mixed, they're Puerto Rican, and, we're an American family. Fuck it. I mean, we're proud of it and it's great. And that's the tapestry of what helps make where we live really unique in the United States. And I think Trump just shits all over that. And when you have people in your family that support him, it's not the easiest thing in the world to actually converse and confront about it. It's really easy to go on social media and complain about it or post about things or shine a spotlight on the atrocities that are happening. And all of that is important. I'm not taking anything away from it, but with this song, They Poisoned Our Fathers, I tried to add a very stark, very deep, very brutal, personal tone to what we are looking at and facing on a national level, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you touch on something that I think is really a very huge, important thing for all of us to recognize, in that there's like this generational thing that happens. I think, it happens over and over and over and over again, where, as people who are like, I don't know how old you are. Like, I'm 42.
I'm
So,
38, so
okay.
yeah, more
So
or less the same.
yeah, so we're approximately around the same, age group, per se. But, like my dad, who's passed on, you know, I, I'm guessing here, but I think that he probably would have voted for Trump, and that would have just made me so mad, and just thinking to myself, Jesus, dude, like my dad was not an unintelligent guy. Like, he was a very smart guy. And to just think that somebody with any level of like intelligence can just not see through that fucker, for
Yeah, have
what
you ever
he
been to
is. He
yeah, have you
he
ever
is a
been to
con
Times
man.
Square?
I'm sorry.
Have you ever been to Times Square? I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, I have. Yeah.
Yeah, so if you've been to Times Square, and you guys have probably played elsewhere in the city where you get a sense of real New York, a slice of life, But you go to Times Square and you think, like, this is horseshit. This is like the worst place on earth. But it's filled with people who were mesmerized by the Naked Cowboy or by the Bubba Gum Shrimp Company restaurant, or the MTV building. Like, and I'm not knocking those places or those street performers, but like, there's a reason why those people are able to do that there, because it's people from elsewhere that come to New York that go and experience all of that, and they're really impressed by it. So I think, and my sympathies for you, for your father passing on. But
Thanks.
to your point about the kind of generational divide, thankfully my father is not a Trump supporter, and I had to call him last week and say, I have this song coming out. It's kind of purposefully offensive and really vulgar, and it's called "They Poisoned Our Fathers," and it's about all this, but it's not about you. And he was like, well, I didn't vote for him, and I need you to know that. And I was like, I got it. It's not about you, but I needed to kind of clarify that. But I think, like, there's a lot of people who are just like fooled by this like con man, who it's the equivalent of going to Times Square and being impressed by somebody who's dressed up as Michael Jackson, when clearly it's not Michael Jackson. It's a dude who lives in Queens. Like, more power to that Michael Jackson impersonator. And I'm not saying inherently that they're a con, but they're a gimmick. And Trump is a gimmick. His brand is a gimmick. His fortune, we've now found out, is a gimmick. It's all a gimmick is a nice way of saying it's all fucking bullshit. So for
Right.
people to have taken the bait in 2016 for whatever reason, I take issue and offense to that, because I'm a hyper liberal, very sensitive person. 4 years later, I don't see an excuse for it at all.
Right.
And I wanted this song to represent that. And, I wanted it to kind of be represented by a strong female voice. I love my wife dearly, but she's not the greatest singer. So I asked Lydia to sing, and I thought that was important to have that represented. And I also wanted to be really venomous and vicious with what I was saying, and the first line of the song is, "Your father fucked a ghost last night." It's because I can't rationalize with a Trump supporter, because I'm not one. But my guess is that for anybody that's attracted to that type of person, they have to be fighting something inside of them. I mean, I'm fighting multiple things inside of me, and I'm not attracted to Trump, or taking on the notion of like this flag etiquette culture, and all this bullshit. Like, people are so obsessed with the flag, and they're so
Dude, don't
pissed
even get
off
me
at
started.
Kaepernick.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to me, the only thing I could think of, I was like, if you care more about the flag and you're more offended by Kaepernick peacefully protesting, which is his right to do, than you are about the things that he's protesting against, like police brutality and the systematic racism, then not only like fuck your flag. Like, my friend's an anti-flag. They have they always say fuck the flag, and that's like their thing. And I love them for it. I was like, how can I be more disgusting than that? So I was like, if you care about the flag so much, why don't you fucking come on it? So the line that Lydia sings is, come on the flag, there God holds your bloody rag.
Mm-hmm.
And I've already gotten emails and calls about it where people are like, some people are like, oh, that's pretty cool. Some people are like, that's brilliant. And some people are like, I really don't appreciate that. And I'm like, well, there it is. You know,
That's America in a nutshell, man.
yeah. Like your candidate is sending emails. My wife signed up for Trump emails. I can't believe, because she's like, I need to know what they're saying about us. But it's so telling. Like, you know, as somebody who is an anti-fascist, but I don't belong to Antifa because Antifa is not an organization, but people don't realize it. But as someone who is an anti-fascist, yeah, and someone who is a Democrat and someone who gets healthcare through the Affordable Care Act, I've been called the enemy in these emails from the Trump campaign and from Trump himself in his speeches. I've been called a loser. I've been called a snake, you know, just for being like a good, considerate person that I am, and different politically. I'm not saying anything about these Trump supporters. I'm not going for the jugular and insulting them below the belt, but I do think they're poisoned. And so that was the tone that I felt like I needed to set. If I was going to, I'm a political person, and a lot of my Divided Heaven songs are inherently political, but they're not overtly political. If I was going to put my political foot forward, I needed it to be borderline disgusting, because I felt like that's what I need to fight with. If you're going to support this guy who openly mocks the disabled and the handicapped and calls women disgusting names, then yeah, ejaculate on your flag. And then when you're upset about that, then maybe you can come to the table and we can have a conversation.
This country has certainly lost its way in a lot of ways, man. Like,
I mean, I'm able to empathize with people. If somebody were to come up to me and say, I'm a veteran, I was in Afghanistan, I would look them in the eye and thank them for their service, and I would explain to them that the line of that, the "Come on the Flag" song is, or line rather, is, it's directed at the inherent and untrue significance of a patterned piece of fabric. You know, I am grateful for what our armed servicemen and women and our transgender service members as well are willing to sacrifice. I get that. But where I think where we could come together is to say, you know, the flag is just representing the bigger thing. I respect your time there. I respect what you did. I can't fathom being willing to lay down my life in order for this country. But that doesn't make you more patriotic than me. That's all bullshit. You know, if someone were to say, well, my grandfather, you know, fought in this, and this represents this for me, and the flag represents this for my family, I would say, no, your grandfather represents that for your family, and your grandfather should be honored, but we don't need to honor him with a flag or a Star-Spangled Banner before every football game or wrestling match or whatever. You can honor him by living a good life and setting a good example. You know, I wanted to be offensive, but I have to be clear with people too, that like, I'm not a nihilist. I'm not a fascist. I'm not an anarchist. You know, I'm a rational person that believes in what's right and what's wrong. And I think that the patriotic monopoly of the flag is dead wrong.
Absolutely. And I feel like this bastardization of utilizing this symbol to be a one-stop shop for what patriotism is, and you know, only this version of patriotism is correct, and in that you have to align it specifically and only in this way, is so counterintuitive to what the spirit of what it's all about is, where I just, it bothers me so much when people hide behind it as like this symbol of like, this is the only truth that we have, you know, when it's gray. Like there is no red, white, and blue. It's gray, and we live in this crazy melting pot, and we have all these different ideas, and we should evolve. Like we shouldn't just stick to like this one idyllic way of America being this way and this way only, because that certainly has not gotten us to the point where we need to be.
I wish that people cared as much about the care and the benefits for first responders all these years later as they do about, the importance of the flag. I think that's wrong.
Totally. I mean, look at what somebody like Jon Stewart is doing, where, years after his, time.
Yeah.
With the Daily Show.
A fucking comedian has to be the one that does, like, and all due respect to him, like if he hadn't have done it and someone of his level of profile hadn't have done it, who knows what would happen.
Right.
But he essentially just walked up to Congress with a mirror and embarrassed them and schooled them and finally got it passed. But it was after so many people that he had fought alongside for almost 2 full presidential administrations. A number of those people had died because they got sick and they couldn't pay for the treatment, or they couldn't get the proper health care, or there was bureaucratic red tape. And I don't know, I could fall down the downward spiral with this shit, but Andy, you get what I'm saying, Andy. You get what I'm saying.
Oh, I totally get what you're saying. And like, again, like I don't want to make this entire, podcast episode just you and I vamping on our discomfort with the Trump administration, but, and cause this episode's going to come out after the election. So, I mean, hopefully we don't have to continue with that, but, heading back towards like more of the music side of things. So with this new single, it's an extension of the work that you've done in previous years. Now, is this the first single from many that are coming down the pike? Do you have a lot more music that you're going to be releasing in the next few months?
I don't know. I do know that there's a new Divided Heaven record on the horizon.
Great.
I started talking to a couple labels about it, and they were like, "Can we hear the record?" And I was like, "It's not done yet, but I wanted to know if you were interested, and you took my call. So that means you're interested enough," which is good news considering that COVID has kind of fucked up everything else,
right,
in my music career. I don't know, Andy. Like a lot of people are just doing singles and releasing singles and then foregoing the record thing. I don't want to forego the record thing, so I kind of wanted to see how this single did, and I know that it was always meant to be out before Election Day. The tone of the song, I mean, I mentioned a fucking voting booth in the second lyric of the song. Like it was always meant to be now and timely, and that's why I'm so appreciative that you wanted to talk to me. I'm hoping that things settle down, and I'd like to release another single or two before there's actually a record, because that seems to be maybe the best of both worlds. It suits what I love, which is records, and it suits, the marketplace, which is driven by singles these days.
Right.
So we'll see.
Yeah. You touched on something that, as a person who runs a record label, I spend a lot of time thinking about this and like ways to try to like leverage, the ebbs and flows of, not only people's attention, but also their availability. And, right now, because of COVID-19 pandemic, there's a lot of people who are at home more, and it may or may not mean that they're listening to more music because, like, for instance, I live in the Bay Area, and I would do a lot of my music listening during my commute. And then I would listen to some at work, but, my job is I work at a tech company, and I spend a lot of time doing like programming, and then I like have to jump back and forth between meetings. So it's tough to like actively listen to music during the day.
Yeah,
when I'm working, but I love listening to music. And so I kind of enjoyed having that hour commute back and forth where I could just like dive into a record or two, or like make a playlist or listen to a podcast. But, I try to think about my own behaviors with that and like think about, okay, well, there's still a lot of good music being turned out every day. And there's singles and there's albums. And, I purchase a lot of music too. I collect vinyl, and, like, what do you think about the idea of releasing a new record in a physical format like right now? Like, do you hesitate to do that, or do you think that that's something that you shouldn't hesitate to do, or do you think that there's any like weirdness around that at all?
There's not weirdness because I don't think there's necessarily a wrong answer. I
Fair
am
enough. Yeah.
guilty of getting in my own head about it. And there was an era of the band where we all got way too inside our heads about what was right and what was wrong. And, it's like every few years, things kind of change and things kind of take on a different level of significance. Let's not mince our words. The biggest game in town right now is Spotify, and getting on Spotify editorial playlists is the only thing that can help your band grow, especially when we have no touring. And Divided Heaven is a great example of, because if I may tout anything, besides the new single, which I hope everyone listens to and loves, it would be my work ethic and the work ethic of the bandmates that I've had over the years. We worked our asses off and toured a lot, and we were able to sell a good amount of records because of that. And the times when it lined up with the Spotify playlist and that kind of stuff, it really felt like we were firing on all cylinders. Without that, you just kind of feel like you're floating in the ocean somewhere, because everybody's releasing a lot of music all the time now, and everything is so oversaturated. So to answer your question, I think if you put something out that is of value, both with what the needle picks up and with what people are looking at, then you're ahead of the curve of a lot of things. And, there are bands that put out really great looking records, but I think their music is shit. And there are bands that have shitty looking record covers, but have great music. I'm not a fan of Spanish love songs artwork, but I'm a huge fan of them as people and as a band and their songs. But I look at their artwork and I'm like, well, what is going on with this stuff? So I use them as kind of an example, because I guess it doesn't matter. And the fact that they are as successful and as great as they are just completely pokes holes in my argument. But when it comes to Divided Heaven and the domain that I have to control and the brand that I'm now in charge of, I do have to think about it. And sometimes I second guess it, and sometimes I quadruple guess it. And then, like in 2017, we released a 6-song CD EP. In 2017, we toured nationally on a CD EP. Such a dumb idea. That was so stupid. Like, why didn't I? And we had a label that wanted to put it out if it was a record, and I was like, no. I got so fucking in my head over it. And looking back on it, I wish that I would have just added 3 or 4 more songs, because we had them, and had it been a record, and then whatever. But we overthought it, and because of that, we had a really strange album cycle, because it wasn't really an album and it was self-released, and we were kind of floating in no man's land. So if I feel like if artists are able to put together something that's really cohesive and something that's worth listening to and worth gravitating to, then if there's a lot of people that listen to it, great. If there's only a few people that listen to it, that's great just the same, because it means something. The mentality of just throwing a bunch of shit against the wall and kind of seeing what sticks, and having a bunch of records that don't look good or don't sound good, or the mail order's fucked up, like those things to me are just like the kiss of death anymore. So I don't know if that answers your question, or if it was just you turned into my band therapist, because I've been going through 2017 in my mind over and over again, because we have all this time now. So,
well, I mean, I think you kind of nailed it. There's no rules. I mean, I only asked the question because I'm interested in your perspective.
yeah.
I've been in a number of bands over the years, and it's very easy to overthink things and to just beat them to death, to the point where you're just like, dude, fuck it. Let's just put it out. We're just going to put this out now, because I don't want to think about it anymore. I just want to move on to the next thing. And that's unfortunate when you get to that point, because you want to be confident in what you're putting out, and you want it to be something that you're going to say, you know what, we're doing this the way that we want to do it, and we're doing it when we want to do it, how we want to do it, because that's what we want, not because, okay, I guess we're just going to do that, or, we can't make a decision, so we're just going to do whatever floats our boat.
Yeah.
But that it happens a lot, actually. But I think that as you grow as an artist, it's one of those muscles that you have to learn how to control a little bit better in order to reap the most benefit, because an album does have a lifespan to get the most benefit out of it. To your point, like nowadays with Spotify, you put your shit through DistroKid, it gets up there, it gets analyzed by the bots at Spotify. Hopefully it gets on to a couple of playlists with your single. Then they do the same thing with the next single. And then you put out the album and you hopefully do another single. And all three of those get on some crazy playlist. Your monthly listeners go through the roof. All of a sudden you get a lot of attention. You get a lot of album sales. You get somebody who wants to book your tour. And all of a sudden you're on to the next level. That would be awesome if it had worked for everyone, but it can't. And it never does. It works for the bands that do all the steps the right way and are very good, and I mean, sometimes they're not good, I mean,
it's funny you say that. This is Andy. This is where I fall into conspiracy theories, because I think that there are jailbreaks around this shit. Like there are bands
Spotify,
that I see.
there is the payola thing. Like that's absolutely a real thing.
Yeah.
Like, there's people who have managed to build very big audiences with their playlists, and they've monetized it. And from what I understand, Spotify actually has pretty strict rules against any payola setup. And if they find out that you're doing that, they will cut you off. Now, I personally also have never experienced seeing that happen, so I don't know if that's a real thing or not. If it were up to me, Spotify wouldn't be the biggest, game in town. It would be Bandcamp. It would, but Bandcamp unfortunately is so artist driven, because like it really comes down to the artist being the person to drive them, people to Bandcamp. While as Spotify is so turnkey, because they have the playlist, they have the podcasts, they have, your full catalog that you pay $10 a month, and then you have unlimited access to it. So I understand why people want to use Spotify. It bums me out that people will willfully use Spotify as opposed to just paying, say, $5 or $6 to buy the album and they have it for the rest of their lives. But that's for another discussion.
Well, something to add to what I previously said. This next record that'll come out will be the fourth Divided Heaven record. Mm-hmm. And I would be willing to kind of throw my first record in the fire and say it's not applicable to my statement that I'm about to make. But the new record that's going to come out, and my last two records, Cold War and Youngblood, respectively, I approached with the frame of mind of longevity, because I knew that the landscape of how music was distributed was going to change. I didn't know what, but Youngblood was 2014 and Cold War was 2018, and this next one will be 2021. And we've seen Spotify and Apple Music really grow into what they are, in those last 6 or 7 years. And we've seen Bandcamp kind of grow into it. I'm not so sure that any of those platforms and companies are necessarily based on longevity. I think they're all suited to do better than MySpace did for music. And as you remember, that was the measuring stick for a good 2.5, 3 years, where that was all that mattered. Mm-hmm. And then when that just disappeared and Facebook kind of became the thing, and then it was likes, and then it's like, it's always going to be something else. And that's okay. If my music and my songs and the physical records that we put out are able to stand the test of time, where people can listen to them in 30 years and not be ashamed to listen to it, and they hopefully still enjoy it, and maybe even it strikes a twinge of nostalgia, then that's the victory for me. I have a lot of records in my collection that I go back and listen to, and some of them maybe just don't resonate with me as well, and some of them, they make the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, like the first time I heard it, and then some of it just didn't age well because it wasn't that good, and so it meant a lot to me at 15, but it means nothing to me at 38. That's okay. I think in part because I'm able to still hold on to something physical with it. When it loses that physicality and I'm tethered to these apps, I don't think Jeff in 20 years is going to give a fuck about any of this shit. But I'm still going to want to be proud of the physical things that I put into the world and the physical things that I put into record stores, which I hope still exist. So that's the side that I err on. That's the direction that I want to go. I work at building the brand around the numbers on the Spotify and on the social medias because I understand that that's helpful for the perception of the band, but it doesn't actually change whether or not I'm writing good songs. I think I'm writing good songs because I'm working hard at them and I'm working with good producers that can help me and good musicians. So that's the most important thing for me. And I think there's a lot of bands that kind of get lumped into the punk rock thing that and Bandcamp is, I think, kind of polluted with just a lot of artists that aren't good, but they can put it out on that platform. In 15 years, are they going to be stoked about it, or are they going to be moved on to something else? Like Tsunami Bomb has been around for a long time. Divided Heaven has been around for 11 years now. Mm-hmm. It's like at a certain point, we have to care about longevity because of, I hate to use this term, but it's true, but about branding and, making sure that we exist in 2023. And so we need to think about that now. And for artists that don't think like that, I have trouble getting as invested, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I think that everyone has the right, of course, to release music if they want to. I think that because music is subjective, that even if your opinion of something, isn't very high, doesn't take away its value to a degree. But
no, absolutely, absolutely.
No,
yeah.
And I know that that's not what you were trying to say. Like I don't think anything you've said is could be seen as offensive or anything like that. But
I hope not.
I mean, I think anyone listening should hopefully take it for what it is, and I certainly understand what you're trying to say, but it is an interesting idea, to think about, what is the measuring stick for what is good, versus what is not good, and the fact that you are correct in a lot of ways, and in that there is a lot of bad stuff, that's just out there, and it's just in the ether, and it's available, which is inherently a good thing, but and somebody may like it, but you have to kind of get through it all, and because of the way that these tools operate, and people's bandwidth being limited, and the other tools that we use, such as Facebook, social media, email lists. I mean, it used to be shows, up until about 10 years ago when the pandemic hit, and then you had to fight through all that white noise to get the attention, and then eventually you hopefully build enough of a following to where it just sustains itself. But it is, I don't even necessarily know if it's harder now, but it's still hard, to really be an artist that can do that and really make it work, and in an authentic way, without necessarily having to rely on your friend who works at Spotify, or rely on your friend who works at Facebook, for those little cheat codes, Yeah.
I would say that I think it's a lot harder now, and I'm not painting myself with that brush to be woe is me about it.
Sure. Yeah.
It's fine. And if my time, ends after this record or before this record, then, I stand by everything that I've done. But I don't know, man. There's a reason why the same, 6 or 7 bands, how do I say that? There's a reason why the same 6 or 7 punk bands headlined Punk Rock Bowling, all these years. It's kind of like they have a rotating thing, like every other year they're doing it. And it was like that on the Warped Tour for a long time until all of these screamo bands came up. But then as soon as they came up, it seemed like a lot of them fizzled away. And I think it's because, like, I don't know, for punk rock, it's something that's so built on nostalgia. It really didn't have longevity in mind. And so I would love to live in a world where the Menzingers are as big as Rancid. I'd love to live in a world where the Menzingers are bigger than Rancid, because I think they're a better band than Rancid. But I fear that they're not going to get to that level. So when it's reaches a point where, like, the Rancids can't be playing anymore, and I'm using these bands as arbitrary examples,
Totally, yeah.
Like a band like the Menzingers are just as important to me, or a band like the Larry Arms. But those bands aren't as popular. I don't think those bands can carry the weight and be, the headliners of these festivals that need to sell, 15,000 tickets or something. Prove me wrong. I hope I'm wrong, because I don't want things like that to disappear. But, like, like, NoFX are a great band, and they've been doing it for so long, and they've done so much for so many smaller bands. But it's, maybe with the exception of Rise Against or Against Me, it doesn't seem like there's enough bands of the next generation that, like, were able to make it to that level. And so when you look at the genre, like, you can be immersed in the punk rock subculture and not give two shits about NoFX and be fine, because there's so much good music out there. But I worry about the longevity of the music, because I think at a certain point it does kind of revolve around some of the elder statesmen doing stuff that's important, and there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of those bigger bands that can really do that. I don't know. Maybe that's a stupid way of looking at it now that I think about it, but I don't know. It's something that my friends and I talk about all the time when we go to those festivals. It's like, well, like, we'd love to see a Red City Radio become that big, or somebody like that, but it's not a knock on them at all. It just doesn't look like it's in the cards for it to happen. Like, they're just kind of like, a lot of these bands have kind of, like, hit a glass ceiling, and they can't break through like a lot of these other bands did. And maybe I'm full of shit, and it doesn't have anything to do with the longevity of the subculture or anything like that. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is something to be said about, like, the cards being stacked against, you, if you're like a smaller or mid-level band, with respect to how it differs for, like, a band like, say, Rancid, or a band like NoFX, where, like, automatically, if NoFX comes out with, like, a new single, it's gonna be on, like, every playlist. It's gonna be in, like, every new news outlet. It's gonna be getting a lot of attention, and it's not that they don't deserve it. It doesn't mean it's any good, I mean, I'm just using them as, like, an arbitrary name. It could be Rancid, it could be Social Distortion, it could be Fear, it could be any band. But, I think that for a band like, say, Red City Radio or the Menzingers, who have built a pretty substantial following for themselves and who do get a lot of accolades, and, like, I see praise being thrown at those two bands in particular. I see a lot of praise being thrown to them quite a lot, actually. And like, one of the things,
well deserved.
Oh, well, sure. Yeah. And, I think that one of the things that I try to constantly be reminding myself of, and that I talk to other bands about, is understanding that the measure of success is a very fluid thing, and that it's not always going to be set to the same, level. I mean, I don't necessarily think that we are going to see a lot of Rancids, or NoFX in the next, like, 10 or so years,
And that was my point. Maybe we don't need to. Maybe I'm full of shit and we just don't need to.
Well, and
That could be true.
I think part of it is because we still have Rancid and we still
Yeah.
have No Effects, so they're still around. Like Bad
Yeah.
Religion, dude, like they've been around for 40 fucking years, and they're still going strong. They're
And they're
still
better
putting
than
out
ever.
great albums,
They're better than they've ever been. Yeah.
Exactly. You know what I mean? So like, or the Descendants, like they're still going strong, So, um, I, to your point of longevity, I think that is a great goal to strive for, is just as an artist, try to just put out good music, and eventually your audience will find you. And as long as it's good, it will stay with you. Um, Now, how you define that, and how you evolve and remain relevant, and use these tools that we have to your benefit, is going to change. And if you are Rancid or No Effects, and you've got like a strong label with strong backing and lots of people working for you who can help you maneuver all that stuff, and then all you have to do is focus on the music, that's obviously something that would be nice for every band to have, but they don't. So they have to, not only be their own manager and be their own label and be their own PR person and be their own booking agent, but they've also got to write the music, and then they've got to perform it, and then they've got to sleep, and they got to work, and they have a family, and that is not for everyone, and to be able to continually put out good music and good art, that resonates with people, is already a challenge. But then when you mix all that other stuff in there, it just becomes almost impossible, And so for the bands like Red City Radio and the Menzingers to have gotten to where they currently are, I'd say that's a pretty significant amount of a win, And I mean, even for you, dude, I mean, like you've got like 600 people listening to you like monthly on Spotify. I mean, at least that's what it says currently. And I mean, shit, dude, that's a lot. Like that's
the thing is, it's such a mind fuck, because at one point it was 60,000, and then it was 20,000 for months, and then it was 7,000 for months, and then it was like,
well, sure.
Once that last playlist dropped off, it was just like, I'm in triple digits now, and I'm grateful for those 600 people. Don't get me wrong.
Right. Yeah.
But it's just like, how did that, like, it's such a deflating feeling.
Right.
And I don't know. I guess like there's a rush to like knowing that there's that many people listening to it. I don't know. Another thing too is I think that I've tried to write memorable songs, and I've written some duds, and I've succeeded in writing some songs that I think are really memorable for people. So I think with longevity in mind, and the people that really like my music, I think they can point to a handful of songs that are going to be really memorable for them for the rest of their lives. And I hope that they're able to go back to those songs later in life and still enjoy them. That would be a win for me. And that's really my goal. Like when this single, They Poisoned Our Fathers, was getting ready to come out, it was the first song that I didn't share with my team, like my manager and my best friend. I didn't share it with my wife until like a few days before it came out, because I wanted them to experience it. I was like, if these are the last 3 people that are going to ever hear a new Divided Heaven song, I want to set the stage for them. We're in a goddamn pandemic. There's all this shit. I don't want them to hear it while they're walking their dog and distracted by picking up poop or whatever it is. I want them to sit there and have a moment with the song, because I worked hard to make this a memorable song for a number of reasons, and in a various number of ways. And I think people can recognize that. And I think that people can recognize that about me and about Divided Heaven, in that they know that it's going to be a quality song. Will they like the song? Will they not like the song? That's to be determined. I can't control that. But I think people have come to expect that there's like a level of quality there that, is exceptional. and sets me apart from a lot of my peers kind of in the initial like punk singer songwriter world, you know. um it, because when you deal with things like the fest, which is great, but there's just so many artists, like everything just kind of get lumps in, and then when you try to really come up with ways to think outside the box to like promote your band or to be noticed on a festival like that, it can be really unnerving because you don't even know where to start, because you want to play to your strengths, which is this crowd, but they're also going to be doing other things. And I've spent a lot of time in the past 2 years thinking, I don't know if I want to do Divided Heaven anymore. I don't know if I want to continue to tour, because I don't, it's so hard to kind of keep it going at a level that is successful, as you know. And so when it comes down to the songs themselves, it's all about making something that can last. And I keep coming back to, I think there's a lot of people in our scene, or whatever you want to call it, that don't think like that. And you can tell when you listen to their songs. You can tell when you pick up their CD. You can tell when you pick up their record, where you're just like, this is B material, and
Well, I think there's something to be said though about, having something just be for the moment though.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. Because you can have both, like kind of tapping into like what we were talking about earlier. And I'm not going to dive too far into it, but this whole concept that, you you can support the troops while also saying that war sucks.
Yeah.
Like those two things can live in the same space and have just as much like power. And they can both be true and valid.
Mm-hmm.
But for some reason, people get it stuck in their head that you can't, or that it has to be one or the other. And I do not believe that to be true at all, And for something like punk rock music in particular, and it can be any music really, but punk rock, I think just because we're talking about it, it is so inherently like visceral and cathartic, and it's kind of meant to be evocative of like emotion and like, this is what's going on right now, like and it can still have longevity, can still have power that transcends the moment, because it can be any moment, it could be every moment, and those I think are the best songs, that end up being something that you can kind of just, it's like, yeah, like this works now for me too, like it worked then and it works for me still. And you can also write a song that is meant to be that from the beginning, where it's like, I want this to be something that's going to last forever, and it has nothing to do with just this moment. It's about forever. And if it translates well and people can grab that, and it can also be a timeless classic,
Sure. And just to chime in, so that your viewers and listeners don't judge me as a complete asshole, I am aware that I'm fully aware of the subjectivity of musical taste,
sure,
and of musical artists and all of that stuff. Where I'm coming from with this is that I want something more from a lot of these artists. And I found that as I've gotten older, I need to look outside of our genre to find it. And it's not because of, poor recording quality or poor distribution or anything. Like it's not that. It's just that I guess I've opened up. I can feel something in an Adele song. I can feel something in a Jason Isbell song in my 30s that I probably couldn't feel at 18. But I don't feel the same things in the songs that I felt them in at 18 as I do in 38. So it's part of my musical evolution, but I'm a fucking punk rocker. Getting into this subculture changed my life for the better in so many ways that I can't even begin to state how thankful I am that this music found me, or I found this music. Because of that, I deeply care about it. And I truly hate complacency and laziness. And that's what I don't want to see. It's not that I don't want people to form bands and just put out music for the fuck of it, if that's what they want to do, because there's certainly a rationale to doing that just for the sake of doing it. But I want to feel something from songs, and I want to be moved when I read lyrics that are really poetic and really powerful. And if I had to pick one genre to listen to for the rest of my life where I could be satiated in that way, it would be from punk rock, because that's what I love the best. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that I want to push people towards quality, not quantity. And because of the trappings of the various social media applications and pages and streaming services that all artists have to jump through, when you're the Miley Cyruses of the world, you can kind of just coast along everything no matter what the newest platform is. But when you're small independent artists, it's kind of like you have to restart every time something new comes up. And by falling into the trappings, we're focusing on things that are only important in the immediate, and they're not as important in the long run, because what's important in the long run is the song, not where the song lives. It's important that the song is great and that the song lives. And I think that there's a lot of our contemporaries in the punk rock and hardcore world that maybe it's just the economy of time, that they have to spend time, begging for followers and listens and editorial playlists, that it's taking away from the beauty of their songs and the poetry in their lyrics. That's what I care about. That's what's important to me. And that's what makes me love music, is if I'm able to feel something from it. And those big artists have the luxury of not having to worry about the business side of it in the same way that us smaller bands do. And I think that a negative side effect of that is that we end up putting out content that isn't A+ content, because we don't have the time and the ability and the money to afford us to be able to put things together that are always A+. And that's a difficult thing to deal with.
Sure. Yeah. I don't think that, I don't personally think that anything that you've said today, is negative. I think that it's fine to have a critical ear. I think it's totally fine to want to challenge people to try to be better, at what they do and be better at their craft. I guess a lot of it just depends ultimately on from what angle are you talking about? Are you talking about, is it supposed to be more musical? Is it supposed to be, better production quality, or should it follow more of a standard like songwriting technique, or like, any number of things that you could point to, right? But at the end of the day, I certainly understand what you're trying to say. It's really just more of like a constructive challenge that you would put out towards
right.
Yeah. I'm like, I think you're good. I think you can be better. Your music just isn't at the point that I think is great. I think it's fine, but I don't think it's great. And I think that at some point you have to come to terms with that as an artist, that maybe you aren't great. Maybe you aren't a fantastic songwriter. I certainly know that I am not an amazing guitar player. Like, I'm not, I totally will admit that. Freely,
Same.
I can play guitar, and I can play certain licks, and I feel like I have a certain degree of skill that allows me to carry my weight in a band like Tsunami Bomb, or a band like I've been in before, like Snipers or Good City Lie Still or California Redemption, or any of those bands. But I'm not going out here trying to start like a jazz trio, like that would just be bad,
Yeah.
So, I think it's a good thing actually to hear that from your peers, sometimes, and the delivery can be, I think the biggest pain point to get over when you're trying to offer feedback, because if you come out and just say, "Oh, dude, that was garbage. Like that was awful," you know,
Yeah,
then
and I'm not doing that
no,
to,
of course
at
not.
all. Yeah.
Yeah, of course not, because that's hurtful, But if somebody asks you for your honest opinion and feedback, I mean, if that's what they want, and you can do it in a constructive manner that gives actual constructive feedback, then it shouldn't hurt their feelings. It should make them feel like, okay, like I trust you, and I'm gonna take that to heart and try to maybe incorporate that, or they don't have to, if they don't
Yeah,
want to.
and a lot of it, Andy, is also on me, and I recognize that. I mean, I can look
Yeah.
at something and think, I don't like it for whatever reason, or I like it for whatever reason. But like, if I get a sense that it's not built around the idea of longevity, or an artist is not built that's me making the choice. That doesn't mean that it's not good
Right.
or it's not great. That's just me making the choice.
Mhm.
Like I don't know if you're like this, but when it comes to, I love discovering new bands and really falling hard for new bands.
Mhm.
I'm a married guy now, so I'm not falling for new girls, which is great, because it helps me free up my mind to, be a family man and love as much music as I can. But when I fall for a new band, especially if it's a band that, like, I didn't get around to listening to them, it kind of happened with the Flatliners for me.
Mm.
Like, I knew them for like 5 years, and I think I even played with them at one point. And then, like, just on tour, middle of nowhere in France, I put on Monumental, and it was just like, oh, this is a very good band.
Mhm.
And I was able to feast on their catalog, and now with each new record, it's like I love that about it. Um, and so I'm always fiending for it. And I guess when I come across artists that, you know, they don't satisfy me in the same way, I'm not as quick to give them a second chance, and maybe I should.
Well, I think that's okay too. Like, I think it's important to keep an open mind and to at least listen to artists. Um, but it's your opinion. You ultimately can decide for yourself. I think this is good. I think this is bad. And
Yeah.
if more bands like the Flatliners, kind of are more like a slow burn, then that's just the way it is. Quick question. As we kind of move into the next segment, if you don't mind, what was the last band? I mean, you mentioned the Flatliners, but like, what's the last band like you just really dove like into like full stop? You're like, holy shit, this is fucking incredible. Like,
Oh, I should clarify that Flatliners moment in France happened in 2011 or 2012, so it's been a while.
okay,
But recently,
yeah, because I can say that for me, I think the last band that I just completely was just holy shit moment was Idols from the UK. When they put out Joy as an Act of Resistance, and I started hearing that,
that's a good record.
I was just like, oh, dude, this is
Yeah.
really, really good. And I finally got a chance to listen to the whole thing, and it was just, dude, this is the new shit. Like, this is good.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then their latest album is just as good. And I'm just like, dude, these guys are killing it. And I saw them live, and just fucking
That's awesome.
incredible,
That's awesome.
dude. Like, it was the best show that I went to last year. Yeah.
Yeah.
Easily. Yeah.
Um, this is going to be a little bit of a cop-out answer, but again, for whatever reason, I didn't pay attention to the Lydia as like a brand.
Hmm.
Like, I just didn't know what she fucking looked like. I didn't know what songs were on what records. I just knew a bunch of songs of hers that I loved. So once I met her and I was able to kind of go back and through her discography and kind of uh, listen to her music in a categorical way and not such an abstract way, whether it was on playlists or, people sending me a song here and there, I really fell in love with her music quite a lot. There's another female singer-songwriter named Sarah Watkins who used to
Yeah.
be
Mm-hmm.
in Nickel Bridge, not Nickelback, obviously, but yeah, she's kind of been in the folk scene for a long time. Her last record just melted me in my chair, and out of nowhere. I heard her on Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. Not no. I heard her on God, what the fuck is that NPR show? Whatever.
Oh, Tiny
She
Desk
was
or music from the Tiny Desk or something like that.
no, it was it used to be called Lake Winnebago. What the fuck? It used to be called Prairie Home Companion, and then that guy came out that he touched all those people inappropriately, so they changed the name.
Oh shit.
Uh,
I didn't hear about that. I don't know about
anyway, yeah, it was the old host. Anyway, but so yeah, Sarah Watkins. I was late to the Jason Isbell train, but I really like his records, and he has 4 or 5 records. So by the time I came around to him, he had a lot to dive into. God, now that I'm naming all these people, I'm noticing an alt country kind of tinge. Creeper, the new Creeper record is great. It sounds like the Black Parade, but like somehow more dynamic, and like with like a little bit of a spookiness to it, which is really cool. Yeah, I'd have to start with those.
Okay, nice.
Yeah.
And what about some artists that you've come across in the last few years that people like may not be aware of, that you would kind of like to give a quick shout out to?
That is a good question. Again, I don't want this to be a cop out, and I hope this doesn't come across as too obscure, because I honestly hope these bands are known. I'm not really sure what the next record entails in terms of labels and stuff, but I'm really proud of the Wiretap Records roster. I thought it was, there's so many bands now. I'm behind on catching up with all of them, but for that period of time where it was us and Radar State and Tiny Stills and Get Married and Odd Robot, I thought it was like a cool, like a different kind of Southern California vibe, and each band was different. So I give Rob at Wiretap a lot of credit for that. Like I said, I hope people don't find those bands to be too obscure. I hope they've heard of them by now at this point. There's a singer-songwriter that's now based in Vegas. He lived in Phoenix for a while. His name is Dane Griffin. He used to play in a band called Merit that I did a tour with. And Merit was like extremely popular in Phoenix and Vancouver. And like did okay everywhere else. So that tour was like kind of lopsided, but it was fun. And Dane is doing a solo record that I've been privileged to hear before. It's totally done, and that's going to be really good. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to take a moment here to collect my thoughts.
Totally fine.
Who else? Emily Davis. Is it Emily Davis or Emily Davies? I want to look this up and get it right.
Sure.
It is Emily Davis and the Murder Police. They're a great band from El Paso, Texas. I discovered them last summer. They're awesome. Yeah, I'm trying to dig into obscure, and I'm having trouble doing it. My friend Adam in Chicago. We're friendly acquaintances. We played together a few times. I wish I were better friends with him, because he's quite the gentleman. But his band is called Blind Adam in the Federal League, and they just released a scathing track, much in the vein of what I did. But his focused kind of more on specifically kind of the Trump administration's treatment of immigrant communities, and a very powerful video, a very powerful song. So definitely Blind Adam in the Federal League. And I think my brain is
totally fine.
up at that point. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, like Rob with Wiretap and the way that he's curated a grouping of artists and albums over the last few years has been pretty impressive. I mean, actually very impressive.
Yeah.
I've gotten to know Rob a little bit over the last year, and he's a really good guy, and I'm super excited to see what's going to happen for next year. I mean, these last few records that he's put, like the new Casket Lottery record, New Mercy Music, I mean, that's some great additions to his lineup. And to your point, where he kind of started curating a big kind of oddball Southern California kind of vibe for a while there. I mean, that's a great place to start.
Yeah, I give him a lot of credit for that, and well, actually, I give him all the credit for that. Who am I kidding? And the
Yeah.
bands, of course. But yeah, it was almost as if, like, on one hand, he couldn't. It seems as if he couldn't say no. It's an artist. Like he didn't say no to me. I pitched him on our record, and he was like, "All right, well, it doesn't really make sense, and I don't have the time, but sure." So, but yeah, I think it definitely worked in his favor, because there were a number of our bands. Some of them didn't really work hard, but there were a bunch of us that really worked hard. And like between
It's an interesting
2018 and 2019, like I could tell, like the second time we did a loop around the States for the Cold War record, like more people would like pick up the record at the merch table and look it over and be like, "Oh yeah, I know this Wiretap label now. This is cool." Like, yeah.
Yeah.
And it felt good to be a part of that. And I tried to explain that to him at one point where I was like, I hope that I'd like to think that we served the label well because we were touring so much. And, it doesn't necessarily make sense for Divided Heaven to take Get Married LPs out on tour with us and sell them at our table, but we'd wear their t-shirts on stage, and we really tried to make the label, kind of a family outing when we were on tour, because
Sure.
we knew that a few of those bands were doing the same thing for us when they were on tour, and when we would play certain places, it would kind of surprise us where the dots connected, like Detroit or Columbus or Rochester and Toronto. And it was just cool that, it wasn't like Lookout Records in the 90s or anything, but it felt like a miniature version of that.
Yeah. I mean, that's kind of like the thing that I think any small label is chasing right now, is just to get a little bit of that magic that, like, say a Lookout had back in the day, where, if I'm, I run Sell the Heart Records, I'm in here in Berkeley, California, like, where fucking Lookout was from, obviously. But
Yeah.
if I get, some email from some person out in, say, Chicago or Gainesville or, Dallas, and they hit me up, it's like, man, I really like your record label. Like, to me, that would be like, everything's worth it, just that little moment. I actually did. I got a postcard from,
Oh, cool.
yeah, this guy who bought a record from one of the bands that we released a record from. And it was just this really nice, thoughtful, quick note on a postcard. And it was basically just hey, how's it going? I really like this record. Thanks for putting it out. Blah, blah, blah. Signed, meh. It was like, that's awesome, dude. Like,
That's
totally
so
unexpected. Cool. Had no idea it was coming. And it just totally made my day. And it made me feel like, dude, this is working, like all this effort is finally paying off. But yeah, man. So, I mean, thank you. Yeah. For sharing that. And I guess, the last question that I like to kind of throw at people is, give me 5 of your favorite records, man. And if you can, try to pinpoint like the 5 that you honestly could say are your favorites,
Right. I would say my favorite record of all time is American Idiot. Okay. Because I didn't know the depths of how angry I could get on a political level until that record came out, essentially, and it kind of framed everything that I was feeling. And then, the yang to the yin of that record, so to speak, are these beautiful poetic pop love songs like What's Her Name and Extraordinary Girl. So that record can pull on my heartstrings and simultaneously get me amped up. And it was kind of the record that I always wanted Green Day to make. And in a lot of ways, it was a simple transition from being a 3-chord punk band to a 4-chord punk band. And having one of those chords be a minor chord, and it was like, oh my God, this new band.
Heaven forbid.
Heaven forbid. But I thought that was, I don't know. I graduated college shortly after that record came out, and I felt it, and it felt important at the time, and I'll always remember that, pardon the pun, time of my life. And I would say that would have to be number 1.
Cool.
The rest are probably interchangeable, but Shout at the Devil by Motley Crue, that was really the first record that I absolutely loved. It's a little bit metal, it's a little bit punk, it's a little bit cheesy, it's a little bit spooky, but it's dangerous. It just feels dangerous, you know. What else? The first Jack's Mannequin record,
Oh, okay. Yeah, I haven't heard that
everything
name in a long time.
everything in transit. I'm a big fan of Andrew McMahon, and when Something Corporate came out, I was in a street punk band, and I had a mohawk, and I really didn't want to like Something Corporate because it was everything, the antithesis of everything that I was at the time. But goddamn, I fell in love with that band, and I had to keep it a secret for so long. And then when Jackson Mannequin, he changed the moniker and kind of did that as a solo thing. That first record it just melts my heart. It's such a beautiful, beautiful record. What else? God, the last two. I don't know. I feel like when people ask me this, I typically throw London Calling on there.
Hey, it's a great record, man.
It's a great record, but I don't know if it's in my top 5. Fuck it. I'll say London Calling by The Clash.
I mean, you are not alone. There have been a few people that have thrown it in there.
Yeah, but then like, I don't know. Sometimes I'm like, give them enough rope is better. You know, I kind of I overthink it. As you can tell in this interview, I tend to overthink what I'm talking about. And last but not least, I would say The Gray Race by Bad Religion.
Okay. Yeah. That's one that I wouldn't necessarily think would be on a lot of people's top 5s from that band.
Yeah, one of the things that my friends and I did when the lockdown first started to happen, you know, just to kind of maintain a semblance of sanity, was we started ranking records by our favorite bands. And, you know, Bad Religion have 17 records to choose from. So it turned into quite an evening of 3 hours of a conversation like this. And during the course of really trying to figure out what record I liked the most, I mean, I bought that record right when it came out. I think I was in 8th grade, and I bought it on vinyl. And I think because I didn't have the ability to overplay it, like I didn't have it on a CD where I could take everywhere with me, it always just kind of, it just stayed on my turntable for years. And it's an interesting time in the band's career because Brett Gurewitz had left and Greg Graffin felt like he needed to kind of step up his game to make the first record without Brett as good as it possibly could be. And I think lyrically, all their records are really good. But that one just, it's got some teeth to it. And I think they're at their best when they show their teeth. I know I found that as I've gotten older, that record speaks to me a lot more than Suffer or Process of Belief. Not that I don't love those records, but
sure,
something about The Gray Race just works.
Yeah, it's a really good record. But yeah, I think more people tend to point towards Suffer or No Control, you know, as the kind of quintessential Bad Religion, and they're great records. But I think like Stranger Than Fiction, and like actually, you know, it's funny. My favorite Bad Religion record is actually All Ages.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it's a super fun record. It's got the live albums or it's got the live tracks, got like the demos and stuff, and just has like a ton of energy. And I don't know, I really was drawn to that record. I think because it had the live songs on there. And it
plays like a compilation. Yeah, because like the recording qualities are all subtly different, and it's, you know, We're Only Gonna Die sounds a whole lot different than The Answer. And if I remember correctly in the sequence, it goes from We're Only Gonna Die to The Answer. So it goes from really raw to like one of the slickest sounding songs they ever did. So
right.
Yeah, that would be a cool answer. I realized I was looking for that CD the other day. I must have lost it years ago and lost track of it because I don't know where it is.
Yeah.
But,
I mean, I haven't listened to it in a long time, but like I wore it out in high school. But well, yeah, like we're gonna end the show then with your new track, and it was a pleasure, you know, having you on here, and you know, keep us posted what's going on. And thanks so much, Jeff.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it very much.
mother fucked a ghost last night, and her name is Fear. She walked him in the voting booth, whispering in his ear, 'cause he hates his mother and he hates yours too. Afraid of them, afraid of you. There ain't enough love to change his mind. There ain't enough love. There ain't enough to change your mind. There ain't enough love to change your mind. Have I failed you like the way that you failed me? There ain't enough love. There's more money to be made from my death than my life. So what's another shoe